Celeste is my daughter. Victoria Whitfield's champagne flute shattered against the Persian rug. Preston's face was drained of color. Camilla's mouth fell open in a silent scream. The family lawyer's pen trembled as he scribbled frantically across legal documents that would rewrite history. "That's impossible," Victoria whispered, her perfectly manicured fingers clutching her pearl necklace. "She's the maid. She's my blood," Harrison rasped, his gray eyes burning with decades of suppressed truth. "The only one of you worth a damn." Dr. Hayes checked the monitors. Heart rate spiking. Blood pressure dropping. Time is running out. But what Harrison said next would shatter the Whitfield empire forever. If you are enjoying this story, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, like the video and comment where you are watching from. Your support helps us bring more powerful stories. And trust me, you won't want to miss them. Now, let's continue. The December morning air carried the scent of jasmine through the sprawling gardens of the Whitfield mansion. Inside the grand foyer, beneath crystal chandeliers that cost more than most people's homes, Celeste Parker moved with quiet efficiency. Her dark hands polished the marble banister with practiced precision, each stroke deliberate and thorough. At 45, Celeste possessed a quiet dignity that 27 years of service hadn't diminished. Her natural hair was pulled back in a simple style, and she wore a crisp navy uniform that she'd pressed herself at 5 that morning. Her deep brown eyes held intelligence that no one in the household had ever bothered to notice. The mansion stirred around her. 3 floors, 42 rooms, and enough wealth to fund a small country's budget for a year. She knew every corner, every secret passage, every hiding spot the Whitfield children had used during their privileged childhoods. "Celeste!" Victoria's shrill voice echoed from the master bedroom. "Harrison's asking for his medication again." Celeste's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. She climbed the curved staircase, her footsteps silent on the imported Italian marble. The hallway stretched before her, lined with portraits of Whitfield ancestors who stared down with cold, judgmental eyes. She knocked softly on the bedroom door before entering. Harrison Whitfield lay propped against silk pillows, his once powerful frame now frail beneath Egyptian cotton sheets. The man who'd built a media empire from nothing was dying, and everyone knew it. "Good morning, Mr. Whitfield," Celeste said softly, approaching his bedside with a glass of water and his morning pills. Harrison's gray eyes found hers, and for a moment, something flickered there. Pain, regret, something deeper than physical suffering. "Celeste," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "You've been good to this family." She helped him sit up slightly, supporting his weight with gentle strength. "It's my job, sir." "No," Harrison said, gripping her wrist with surprising force. "It's been more than that. You raised my children when their mother couldn't be bothered. You've shown them kindness they never deserved." Celeste's breath caught. In 27 years, Harrison had never spoken to her with such intensity, such familiarity. "Sir, you should rest." "Time for rest is over," Harrison interrupted, his eyes burning with sudden urgency. "There are things that need to be said." Victoria burst through the door, her silk robe billowing behind her like a storm cloud. At 50, she'd maintained her beauty through expensive procedures and sheer vanity. Her blonde hair was perfectly styled even at this early hour, and her blue eyes held the cold calculation of a woman who'd married for money and was finally about to collect. "Harrison, darling, you're exhausting yourself," Victoria cooed, though her tone carried more annoyance than concern. "Celeste, he needs his rest. The doctors said." "The doctors said I'm dying," Harrison stated flatly. "Not deaf." Celeste stepped back, recognizing the familiar tension that preceded the family's arguments. She'd witnessed countless fights over the years, always invisible, always forgotten until someone needed something cleaned or fetched. "I'll prepare your breakfast, Mr. Whitfield," she said quietly. "Wait." Harrison's voice stopped her at the door. "I want to speak with Dr. Hayes today. And Attorney Pierce. Have them here by noon." Victoria's expression shifted, predatory instincts sharpening. "Of course, darling. Are you updating your will?" Harrison's smile was thin as paper. "Something like that." Celeste slipped from the room, but not before catching the look that passed between Harrison and his wife. 27 years in this house had taught her to read the undercurrents, the silent battles fought with glances and carefully chosen words. Downstairs, the kitchen bustled with morning activity. Mrs. Eleanor, the head housekeeper, barked orders at the cooking staff while reviewing the day's schedule. At 63, Eleanor ruled the domestic staff with iron efficiency and genuine kindness. "Morning, Celeste," Eleanor said warmly. "How's he doing today?" "Asking for lawyers," Celeste replied, washing her hands at the kitchen sink. Eleanor's expression grew serious. "The end's coming then." Celeste nodded, though something twisted in her chest at the thought. She'd spent more time with Harrison Whitfield than his own children had. She'd brought him soup when he was sick, listened to his late-night ramblings about business, even shared quiet moments when grief over his parents' deaths had overwhelmed him. But she was still just the maid. When he died, she'd be dismissed with a small pension and 30 years of memories no one cared about. The front door slammed, announcing the arrival of the Whitfield children. Preston entered first, his expensive suit wrinkled from whatever party he'd attended the night before. At 28, he possessed his father's height but none of his strength, his face soft from years of privilege and excess. "Is the old man finally croaking?" Preston asked loudly, tossing his car keys on the antique side table. Camilla followed, her designer heels clicking against the marble. At 26, she was Victoria's clone in miniature, beautiful, entitled, and cruel. Her red dress cost more than most people earned in a month. "Preston, don't be vulgar," Camilla sniffed. "Though I did hear he's meeting with lawyers today." 24-year-old Benedict stumbled in last, reeking of alcohol and cigarettes. The youngest Whitfield child had embraced his role as the family disappointment with artistic dedication. "About time," Benedict mumbled. "I've got debts to pay." Celeste watched from the kitchen doorway as the three siblings gathered in the living room, already dividing their inheritance in their minds. None of them had visited their dying father out of love or concern. They circled like vultures, waiting for death to deliver their payday. A memory surfaced unbidden, a 12-year-old Preston crying after a nightmare, and Celeste holding him until he fell back asleep. Camilla at 16, sobbing over a boy who'd broken her heart, seeking comfort from the one person who listened without judgment. Benedict at 8, proudly showing her a drawing he'd made, desperate for any adult's approval. She'd loved these children once. Raised them when their parents were too busy with social obligations and business deals. But they'd grown into strangers, hardened by wealth and poisoned by entitlement. "Celeste!" Victoria's voice cut through her reverie. "Harrison wants his lunch early today. Something light." "Yes, ma'am," Celeste replied, returning to her duties. But as she prepared Harrison's meal, her hands trembled slightly. Something was different about today. The way Harrison had looked at her, spoken to her, gripped her wrist, it felt like a goodbye that carried weight beyond simple employment. Outside, storm clouds gathered over Beverly Hills, and Celeste couldn't shake the feeling that this December day would change everything. The storm that had threatened all morning finally broke as Dr. Robert Hayes and attorney Jonathan Pierce arrived at the Whitfield estate. Rain hammered against the tall windows of Harrison's private study, where the dying billionaire had insisted on conducting what everyone assumed would be his final business meeting. Celeste carried a silver tray into the study, her movements careful and deliberate. The room smelled of leather-bound books and the faint medicinal scent that had begun following Harrison everywhere. She set down cups of Earl Grey tea and fresh scones, acutely aware of the tension crackling through the air like electricity. Harrison sat behind his massive desk, looking more alert than he had in weeks. His gray suit hung loose on his diminished frame, but his eyes burned with purpose. Dr. Hayes checked his pulse one final time while Attorney Pierce arranged legal documents with nervous precision. "Thank you, Celeste," Harrison said softly. "Please stay." Victoria, who had been hovering near the door like a predator waiting to strike, straightened in surprise. "Harrison, surely this is private family business." "Celeste should." "Celeste stays," Harrison repeated, his voice carrying the authority that had built an empire. "What I have to say concerns her directly." The three Whitfield children exchanged confused glances. Preston loosened his tie, suddenly uncomfortable. Camilla's perfectly manicured fingers drummed against her designer purse. Benedict looked up from his phone for the first time all day, sensing something important was about to happen. Celeste froze near the window, her heart hammering against her ribs. In 27 years, she had never been included in family business. She was furniture, invisible, spoken about but never to. "Sir, I should return to my duties," she said quietly. "No." Harrison's voice was firm. "Your duties are exactly why you need to hear this." Attorney Pierce cleared his throat nervously. "Mr. Whitfield, are you certain you want to proceed with these changes? They are quite substantial." "I've never been more certain of anything in my life," Harrison replied. He turned to face his family, and Celeste saw something she had never witnessed before. Regret. Deep, soul-crushing regret that seemed to age him even further. "I'm dying," Harrison began, his words cutting through the room like shards of glass. "We all know this. The doctors give me days, maybe hours. But before I go, there are truths that must be told. Debts that must be paid." Victoria moved closer to her husband's chair, her hand resting possessively on his shoulder. "Of course, darling. Whatever you need to say." Harrison looked at his wife's hand, then gently removed it. 47 years ago, I believed I was sterile. The doctors told me I would never father children. It destroyed me, because more than anything, I wanted an heir. Someone to carry on what I was building. The room fell silent except for the rain against the windows and the steady tick of the antique clock on the mantelpiece. I was 25, drowning my sorrows at the Sunset Club downtown. My friend Frank Morrison took me there, said I needed to forget my troubles for one night. Harrison's voice grew distant, lost in memory. I met a woman there. Beautiful, intelligent, kind. Her name was Rosalind Jones. Celeste's breath caught in her throat. Her mother's name was Rosalind Jones. I was drunk, heartbroken, reckless, Harrison continued. We spent one night together. I never expected to see her again. Then 3 months later, she appeared at my office. She was pregnant. Victoria's face had gone pale beneath her makeup. "Harrison, what are you saying?" "I'm saying that the doctors were wrong. I wasn't sterile. And that night at the Sunset Club, I fathered a child." Preston stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the hardwood floor. "This is insane. You're delirious from the medication." "Sit down," Harrison commanded, and something in his tone made Preston obey immediately. Rosalind Jones came to my office, pregnant and afraid. I panicked. I had just announced my engagement to Victoria. My reputation, my business deals, everything hung in the balance. Harrison's eyes found Celeste's across the room, and she saw pain there that took her breath away. I offered Rosalind money to disappear, to give up the child for adoption, to pretend it never happened. His voice broke slightly. She refused, said she would raise the child alone, wanted nothing from me except for me to stay away. Celeste's legs felt weak. The room seemed to tilt around her as pieces of a puzzle she never knew existed began falling into place. "But I couldn't stay away," Harrison whispered. "I hired private investigators to watch them. I made sure they had enough money, sent anonymous payments for rent, food, medical bills. I watched my daughter grow up from a distance, loving her in secret, never able to claim her." "Daughter!" Camilla's voice was barely a whisper. Harrison stood slowly, his frail body trembling with effort. "When Rosalind died in that car accident 18 years ago, I faced an impossible choice. My daughter was 27, alone in the world, about to lose her home because she couldn't afford the rent without her mother's income." Celeste gripped the windowsill, her knuckles white. Her mother had died when she was 27. She remembered the mysterious benefactor who had paid for the funeral, the job offer that had arrived just when she needed it most. I couldn't let her struggle. I couldn't let her know the truth because it would have destroyed everything I had built with Victoria and our children. So I brought her here. Not as my daughter, but as someone I could protect. Someone I could keep close. The study erupted in chaos. Preston began shouting. Camilla started crying. Benedict dropped his phone, the screen shattering against the floor. Victoria stumbled backward as if she had been physically struck. But Harrison's eyes never left Celeste's face. "Celeste Parker," he said, his voice carrying across the noise like a prayer. "You are my firstborn child, my daughter, and I have spent 27 years watching you become everything I hoped my children would be." Celeste felt the world spin around her. Her mother's deathbed words suddenly made sense. "Your father loved you more than you'll ever know," Rosalind had whispered. "Someday you'll understand." "This is impossible," Victoria shrieked. "She's black. She's the maid. She's nothing." Harrison's voice turned to ice. "She is my blood. She has worked in this house for 27 years, raising your children while you shopped and lunched and spent my money. She has shown more integrity, more strength, more wisdom than any of you ever have." Dr. Hayes checked Harrison's monitors, concern creasing his features. "Mr. Whitfield, your heart rate is dangerously elevated. You need to rest." "No," Harrison gasped, clutching his chest. "Not yet. Not until this is finished." Attorney Pierce stepped forward, his hands shaking as he held up a thick legal document. "Mr. Whitfield has executed a new will. The bulk of his estate, including all business holdings, properties, and liquid assets, will transfer to Miss Celeste Parker upon his death." The room exploded again. Preston lunged toward the desk, his face twisted with rage. "You can't do this. We're your legitimate children. We have rights." "You have what I choose to give you," Harrison replied coldly. "Which, considering how you've treated your sister all these years, is more than you deserve." Celeste finally found her voice, though it came out as barely a whisper. "Sister." Harrison nodded, tears streaming down his weathered cheeks. "Preston, Camilla, and Benedict are your half-siblings. The children you've raised, loved, protected all these years. They never knew, but you were always family." The irony was devastating. Celeste had spent decades caring for her own brothers and sister, watching them grow from children into adults, never knowing they shared the same father. She had loved them unconditionally while they treated her as less than human. "I can't," Celeste said, shaking her head. "This isn't real. This can't be real." Harrison pressed a button on his desk, and a hidden panel slid open. Inside was a manila envelope, yellowed with age. "DNA tests," he said simply. "Paternity documents. Birth certificates. Everything you need to prove what I'm telling you is true." Benedict, who had been silent throughout the revelation, suddenly spoke up. "The bracelet," he said, his voice strange. "Mom, remember? That silver bracelet Celeste always wears. You said it looked familiar." Victoria's face went ashen. "The one I gave you for our first anniversary," she whispered to Harrison. "You said you lost it." "I didn't lose it," Harrison admitted. "I gave it to Rosalind before Celeste was born. It was the only thing I could give my daughter at the time. A piece of her father she could carry with her always." Celeste's hand moved unconsciously to the thin silver bracelet at her wrist. Her mother had told her it was a gift from her father, but she had never known more than that. The monitors beside Harrison's chair began beeping rapidly. Dr. Hayes moved quickly to check his vitals, his expression growing grave. "Mr. Whitfield, your body can't handle this stress. We need to end this meeting now." "Almost finished," Harrison gasped, his breathing labored. "Celeste, come here. Please." Celeste approached the desk on unsteady legs. Harrison reached out with trembling hands and grasped hers. "I know this changes everything," he whispered. "I know it's overwhelming. But I need you to know that every day for 27 years, I have watched you with pride. You are everything I hoped a daughter could be. Strong, kind, intelligent, good. You are the best of me, and I am so sorry it took me this long to tell you." Tears streamed down Celeste's face as 45 years of questions suddenly had answers. Why her mother had never dated anyone else. Why money had always appeared when they needed it most. Why this job offer had come at exactly the right time. Why Harrison had always looked at her with something she couldn't identify. It had been love. Paternal love, hidden beneath layers of secrecy and social convention. I don't know how to process this, Celeste admitted. We'll figure it out together, Harrison said. For however much time I have left. The beeping of the monitors grew more urgent. Dr. Hayes prepared a syringe with steady hands. Mr. Whitfield, I'm going to give you something to calm your heart. This conversation needs to end now. Harrison nodded weakly, but his grip on Celeste's hand tightened. Don't let them take this away from you, he whispered urgently. You deserve everything I'm giving you. You've earned it through 27 years of service, love, and sacrifice. Victoria stepped forward, her face a mask of rage and disbelief. I won't let this stand. I'll fight this in court. I'll prove you're not competent to make these decisions. Harrison smiled, though it took obvious effort. Good luck with that. I've been planning this for months. Every document is in order. Every witness is credible. And Mr. Pierce has recordings of every conversation proving my mental competency. Attorney Pierce nodded solemnly. Everything is legally binding and ironclad. Dr. Hayes administered the injection, and Harrison's breathing began to slow. But his eyes remained fixed on Celeste. My beautiful daughter, he whispered. I'm so proud of who you've become. And as Harrison Whitfield slipped into medicated sleep, the Whitfield family began to understand that everything they thought they knew about their lives, their inheritance, and their future had just been destroyed forever. But the biggest shock was yet to come. The silence that followed Harrison's sedation was deafening. Rain continued to pound against the windows as if nature itself was expressing the chaos that had erupted inside the mansion. Dr. Hayes monitored Harrison's vital signs while Attorney Pierce gathered his documents with trembling hands, clearly shaken by what he had just witnessed. Celeste stood frozen beside Harrison's desk, her hand still tingling from where he had touched her. The silver bracelet on her wrist felt heavier now, weighted with a truth that threatened to crush her. She stared at the manila envelope containing DNA evidence, afraid to touch it, afraid to make any of this real. Victoria was the first to break. Her perfectly composed facade cracked like expensive porcelain hitting concrete. Get out, she hissed at Celeste, her voice low and venomous. Get out of this room right now. Victoria, Attorney Pierce began, but she whirled on him with fury that made him step backward. Don't you dare speak to me about legalities, Victoria snarled. My husband is dying and clearly delusional. No court in America will honor the ravings of a man pumped full of morphine. Preston moved toward Celeste, his face flushed with rage and disbelief. This is insane. You think we're going to let the maid steal our inheritance? You think we're going to believe this ridiculous story? The DNA evidence is conclusive, Attorney Pierce said firmly, though his voice shook. I've reviewed every document. Mr. Whitfield has been planning this revelation for months. He's mentally competent, and every legal requirement has been met. I don't care if he has video footage, Camilla shrieked, mascara streaming down her cheeks. She's nobody. She's been cleaning our toilets for 27 years. She can't just waltz in here and take everything we've worked for. Worked for. The words escaped Celeste's lips before she could stop them. The room turned toward her, and she felt the weight of their stares like physical blows. What exactly have any of you worked for? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Preston's jaw clenched, Camilla's eyes narrowed dangerously, and even Benedict looked up from where he'd been staring at his shattered phone. How dare you, Victoria breathed. How dare you speak to us like that? You forget your place. My place. Celeste felt something she had suppressed for 27 years beginning to rise in her chest. Not anger exactly, but something deeper. Recognition. What exactly is my place, Mrs. Whitfield? She looked around the room at the faces that had defined her world for nearly 3 decades. Faces she had served, protected, loved, and endured. Faces that had never once looked at her with respect or recognition until this moment. I raised your children when you were too busy with charity luncheons and shopping trips. I held Preston when he had nightmares about the boarding school bullies. I taught Camilla how to braid her hair when you said you didn't have time. I helped Benedict with his homework every night for 6 years because none of you could be bothered. Her voice grew stronger with each word, 27 years of silence finally finding sound. I've cooked every meal, cleaned every room, organized every party, handled every crisis. When Preston crashed his car drunk at 17, who covered for him? When Camilla had that pregnancy scare at 19, who drove her to the clinic and held her hand? When Benedict was arrested for possession last year, who bailed him out and never told a soul? The family stared at her in shock. Celeste had never spoken more than a few polite words at a time. She had been invisible, a piece of furniture that moved and cleaned and served without complaint or commentary. You want to know what I've worked for? Celeste continued, her voice steady despite the tears streaming down her face. I've worked for 27 years to earn the love and respect of a family that treated me like dirt. I've worked to build something meaningful out of service and sacrifice. And now you want to deny me the recognition that I'm actually part of this family. Dr. Hayes cleared his throat uncomfortably. Perhaps we should continue this conversation when Mr. Whitfield wakes up. His heart rate is stabilizing, but he needs rest. No, Victoria said firmly. This conversation ends now. Celeste, pack your things. You're fired. Security will escort you off the property within the hour. Attorney Pierce stepped forward, his professional composure returning. Mrs. Whitfield, you don't have the authority to terminate Miss Parker's employment. According to the documents Mr. Whitfield signed today, she is now the primary beneficiary of his estate. Technically, she has more legal standing in this house than you do. Victoria's face went white with rage. We'll see about that. Preston, call our lawyers. Call Judge Morrison. Call everyone we know. I want this insanity stopped before it goes any further. Preston pulled out his phone, his hands shaking with fury. Dad's lost his mind. There has to be a way to prove incompetence. This whole thing is a scam. It's not a scam, Benedict said quietly from the corner. Everyone turned to look at him in surprise. The youngest Whitfield rarely spoke during family discussions, preferring to observe from the sidelines. What did you say? Victoria demanded. Benedict stood up slowly, his face pale but his voice steady. I said it's not a scam. Look at her, Mom. Really look at her. He walked across the room until he stood directly in front of Celeste. You have Dad's eyes, he said simply. I always wondered why they looked familiar. And your hands. You have the same long fingers he does. Same way of holding things. Camilla made a strangled sound. Benedict, don't be ridiculous. Remember when we were kids and Celeste would read to us? Benedict continued, ignoring his sister. She knew all the same stories Dad used to tell us. Stories about his childhood, about his parents. Stories she shouldn't have known unless someone who was there told them to her. The room fell silent except for the rain and Harrison's steady breathing. Benedict's observations hung in the air like pieces of a puzzle that everyone had been too blind or too selfish to see. And remember the way Dad looks at her sometimes? Benedict pressed on. Like he's proud of something but can't say what. Like he's sorry about something but doesn't know how to fix it. Stop it, Preston said harshly. Just stop it right now. But Benedict wasn't finished. You know what the weirdest part is? She's the only one of us who turned out right. She's kind, hard-working, intelligent, honest. Everything Dad always wanted us to be, but we never were. The truth of his words hit like a physical blow. For 27 years, they had watched Celeste display all the qualities Harrison had tried to instill in his legitimate children. Qualities they had rejected in favor of entitlement and excess. She's our sister, Benedict said softly. And we've treated her like garbage her entire life. Camilla burst into fresh tears, but these were different. Not tears of anger or loss, but tears of shame and recognition. Oh God, she whispered. All those times we called her names. All those times we made her clean up our messes. All those times we treated her like she was nothing. She is nothing. Preston shouted, but his voice cracked. She's the help. She's always been the help. No, Celeste said firmly. I'm your father's daughter. Your sister. Whether you accept it or not doesn't change the DNA evidence or the legal documents. It doesn't change 27 years of loving a family that couldn't love me back." Victoria stepped forward, her face twisted with desperate calculation. "Even if this insane story is true, even if you are Harrison's daughter, you have no legal right to everything. We're his legitimate children. We're his wife. We have claims." "You have what the will grants you," Attorney Pierce said professionally. "Mr. Whitfield has established trust funds for each of his children. Substantial amounts that will ensure comfortable lives. But the bulk of the estate, including all business holdings and properties, transfers to Miss Parker." "How much?" Preston demanded. "How much do we get?" Attorney Pierce consulted his documents. Each child receives $5 million in trust, accessible at age 30 with annual distributions before that. The number should have been cause for celebration. $5 million was more money than most people could dream of. But compared to Harrison's estimated worth of $800 million, it felt like crumbs. $5 million. Camilla shrieked. "That's nothing. That's not even enough to maintain our lifestyle." "Then maybe it's time to change your lifestyle," Celeste said quietly. The suggestion hung in the air like a bomb waiting to explode. The idea that the Whitfield children might have to work, budget, or live within means was so foreign it seemed impossible. Dr. Hayes checked his watch and approached the group. "I'm sorry, but I need everyone to leave. Mr. Whitfield requires complete rest. His heart can't handle any more stress today." "Good," Victoria said coldly. "Because this conversation is over. Celeste, I want you out of this house tonight. Take your lies and your forged documents and disappear." "The documents aren't forged," Attorney Pierce said firmly. "And Miss Parker has every legal right to remain in this house. In fact, as the primary beneficiary, she has more right to be here than anyone else." Victoria's composure finally shattered completely. "This isn't over," she hissed at Celeste. "I'll fight this with everything I have. I'll prove you're a fraud. I'll prove Harrison is incompetent. I'll destroy you before I let you steal my life." With that, Victoria stormed from the room, her heels clicking angrily against the marble floor. Preston and Camilla followed, their faces masks of rage and disbelief. Benedict lingered for a moment, looking at Celeste with something that might have been regret. "I'm sorry," he said simply. "For everything. For all of it." Then he too left, leaving Celeste alone with Attorney Pierce and Dr. Hayes. The silence was overwhelming. Celeste sank into one of the leather chairs, her legs finally giving out under the weight of everything that had happened. "Miss Parker," Attorney Pierce said gently, "I know this is overwhelming, but you should know that Mr. Whitfield has been preparing for this day for over a year. Every document is in order. Every legal challenge has been anticipated and prepared for." Celeste looked at the manila envelope still sitting on Harrison's desk. "Is it really true? The DNA evidence?" "I reviewed it myself. There's no doubt. You are Harrison Whitfield's biological daughter." Dr. Hayes finished checking Harrison's monitors and approached Celeste with professional kindness. "He's stable for now, but his condition is deteriorating rapidly. You should prepare yourself. It could be hours or days, but not much longer." Celeste nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. She had just discovered her father, only to face losing him almost immediately. "I'll check on him every few hours," Dr. Hayes continued. "But right now he needs rest. And you need time to process everything that's happened." As the doctor and lawyer gathered their things and left, Celeste found herself alone with a man who had just turned her world upside down. She approached his bedside carefully, studying his sleeping face for features she might recognize in herself. The eyes Benedict had mentioned, the long fingers, the stubborn set of his jaw that she saw in her own mirror every morning. "Daddy," she whispered, the word feeling strange and wonderful on her lips. Outside, the storm was beginning to pass, but inside the Whitfield mansion, the real tempest was just beginning. Victoria was making phone calls, Preston was researching legal challenges, and Camilla was plotting ways to discredit the woman who had just inherited their world. But they had no idea what other secrets Harrison Whitfield had been keeping. And tomorrow would bring revelations that would make today's bombshell seem like a gentle breeze. Celeste had not slept. She sat at the kitchen table, the manila envelope open before her, surrounded by documents that proved her entire life had been a carefully constructed lie. Birth certificates, DNA reports, private investigator files, bank records showing decades of anonymous payments. Each page told the story of a father who had loved her from the shadows while she believed herself abandoned. The house was eerily quiet. Victoria and the children had locked themselves in their respective rooms, emerging only to make hushed phone calls to lawyers and allies. Mrs. Eleanor had arrived at 5 a.m. as usual, taken one look at Celeste's tear-stained face, and simply started brewing coffee without questions. "Rough night?" Eleanor asked gently, setting a steaming mug beside the scattered papers. Celeste looked up at the woman who had been her supervisor, mentor, and closest friend for over 2 decades. "Eleanor, did you know?" The older woman's expression was carefully neutral. "Know what, dear?" "About my father. About Harrison." Celeste's voice was barely a whisper. "Did you know who I really was?" Eleanor was quiet for a long moment, studying Celeste's face with knowing eyes. Finally, she sighed and sat down across from her. "I suspected. After about 5 years of working together, I started noticing things. The way Mr. Whitfield looked at you. The way he always made sure you were taken care of. The way he'd get angry if any of the children were particularly cruel to you. Why didn't you say anything?" "Because it wasn't my place," Eleanor replied firmly. "And because I could see the man was torturing himself over it every single day. Whatever his reasons for keeping quiet, they were eating him alive." The sound of footsteps on the marble stairs announced Harrison's family descending for what would undoubtedly be another day of warfare. Celeste quickly gathered the documents, but Eleanor placed a gentle hand on her arm. "Don't hide who you are anymore," Eleanor said softly. "You've spent 27 years making yourself small for their comfort. That time is over." Victoria entered the kitchen first, her usually perfect appearance showing signs of strain. Her blonde hair was pulled back severely, and dark circles under her eyes suggested she had slept as little as Celeste. She was followed by Preston, who wore an expensive suit but looked haggard, and Camilla, who clutched her phone like a lifeline. Benedict came last, moving slowly and avoiding eye contact with everyone. "Coffee," Victoria demanded, not looking at Celeste. "And I want my breakfast in the dining room. We have important calls to make." Eleanor stood to comply, but Celeste remained seated. "Mrs. Eleanor isn't your servant," she said quietly. "She's the head housekeeper, and she deserves your respect." Victoria whirled around, her blue eyes flashing with rage. "Don't you dare tell me how to treat my staff. You may have convinced my delusional husband to give you his money, but you're still nobody to me." "She's right, though." The unexpected voice belonged to Dr. Hayes, who had just entered through the back door after checking on Harrison. "Mrs. Eleanor has served this family with distinction for over 30 years. She deserves better treatment than she's received." Dr. Hayes looked tired but determined as he addressed the room. "I've just finished examining Mr. Whitfield. His condition has deteriorated overnight. I'm recommending hospice care, which means medical professionals will be in and out of this house constantly over the next few days." "How long?" Celeste asked, her voice tight with emotion. "Hours, not days," Dr. Hayes replied gently. "I'm sorry, but he's asking for you. He's been asking for you since he woke up an hour ago." Celeste stood immediately, but Victoria blocked her path to the stairs. "Absolutely not," Victoria said coldly. "I'm his wife. I make decisions about his medical care and who gets to see him." "Actually," Dr. Hayes interjected, "Mr. Whitfield specifically named Miss Parker as his medical power of attorney in the documents he signed yesterday. All decisions regarding his care now go through her." The kitchen fell silent except for the tick of the clock and the soft hum of the refrigerator. Victoria's face went through a spectrum of emotions: shock, rage, disbelief, and finally a kind of defeated fury. "This is impossible," she whispered. "You can't just steal someone's life in a single day." "I didn't steal anything," Celeste replied. standing taller than she ever had before. I was born into this family. You just refused to see it. Preston stepped forward, his face flushed with anger. Born into this family? You were born to some woman Dad had a one-night stand with. That doesn't make you family, doesn't it? Benedict spoke up from the corner, surprising everyone again. She's been more family to us than any of us have been to each other. When's the last time any of us actually took care of Dad? When's the last time we visited him just to spend time with him, not to ask for money? Shut up, Benedict, Camilla snapped, but her voice lacked conviction. No, I won't shut up, Benedict continued, his voice growing stronger. We've all been sitting around waiting for him to die so we could inherit his money. Celeste has been taking care of him, making sure he was comfortable, being there when he was lonely or scared. Which one of us sounds more like family? Dr. Hayes cleared his throat diplomatically. Perhaps we could continue this discussion later. Mr. Whitfield is quite agitated, and seeing Miss Parker might help calm him. Celeste moved toward the stairs, but Victoria grabbed her arm with surprising strength. If you think I'm going to let you manipulate a dying man into giving you everything, you're mistaken. Then come with me, Celeste said simply. Come upstairs and hear what he has to say. But I won't be kept from my father when he's dying. The word father hit the room like a physical blow. Even after yesterday's revelations, hearing Celeste claim that relationship out loud was jarring. Victoria released her arm but followed closely as they climbed the stairs. Preston, Camilla, and Benedict trailed behind, creating an awkward funeral procession toward Harrison's bedroom. The master bedroom had been transformed into a medical facility overnight. Monitors beeped softly, for Stan stood sentinel beside the bed, and the scent of antiseptic had replaced Harrison's usual cologne. But Harrison himself was awake and alert, his gray eyes tracking movement as his family entered. Celeste, he said, his voice weak but clear. Thank God. I was afraid I wouldn't get to talk to you again. She approached his bedside, acutely aware of the hostile eyes watching her every move. I'm here, Dad. How are you feeling? The casual use of Dad made Preston inhale sharply, but Harrison's face lit up with the first genuine smile anyone had seen from him in months. Better now, he whispered. We need to talk. All of us. Together. Victoria moved to his other side, her hand possessively covering his. Harrison, darling, you need to rest. The doctors said. The doctors said I'm dying, Harrison interrupted. Which means I don't have time for rest. I have things to explain. Things you all need to understand before I'm gone. Dr. Hayes checked the monitors and nodded. His vitals are stable. But please keep it brief and calm. Harrison struggled to sit up higher, and Celeste instinctively moved to help him, adjusting his pillows with the practiced ease of someone who had been caring for him for years. The simple gesture was not lost on anyone in the room. 27 years ago, Harrison began, his voice gaining strength as he spoke, I made a choice that haunted me every day since. When I brought Celeste here, I told myself I was protecting her. Protecting all of you. But the truth is, I was protecting myself. He looked around the room at his family, his gaze lingering on each face. I was a coward. I was so afraid of losing my reputation, my business, my marriage, that I chose to hide my daughter rather than claim her. Harrison, Victoria began, but he held up a weak hand to stop her. Let me finish. Please. I need to say this while I still can. Harrison's eyes found Celeste's again. I justified it by telling myself that bringing you here was enough. That watching you grow into an amazing woman was enough. That providing for you secretly was love. Tears streamed down his weathered cheeks. But it wasn't love. Love would have been claiming you publicly. Love would have been giving you my name, sending you to the best schools, introducing you as my daughter. Love would have been brave. The room was completely silent except for the soft beeping of medical equipment and the sound of Harrison's labored breathing. Instead, I let you serve the children you should have grown up beside as equals. I let you be treated as less than human while you displayed more humanity than any of us. I let you earn your place in this family through labor and sacrifice when you should have had it by birthright. Celeste gripped his hand tightly, her own tears falling freely. You were protecting everyone. I understand. No, Harrison said firmly. I was protecting my own cowardice. And in doing so, I robbed you of 27 years of being my acknowledged daughter. I robbed Preston, Camilla, and Benedict of 27 years of knowing their sister. I robbed myself of 27 years of openly loving you the way a father should love his child. Preston shifted uncomfortably near the foot of the bed. Dad, we don't need to relitigate the past. What's done is done. What's done is done, Harrison agreed. But what happens next is still up to all of you. He looked directly at his 3 legitimate children. The trust funds I've established for each of you are substantial. $5 million is enough to live comfortably for the rest of your lives if you're smart about it. It's enough to start businesses, buy homes, support families. But it's not enough to maintain the lifestyle we've been living, Camilla said bitterly. No, it's not, Harrison agreed. Because that lifestyle was built on excess and waste. It was built on the assumption that money is infinite and work is optional. It was built on entitlement rather than effort. Benedict stepped closer to the bed, his voice quiet but steady. What are you really saying, Dad? Harrison smiled at his youngest son with genuine affection. I'm saying that inheriting everything would have been the worst thing that could happen to any of you. You would have continued down the same path of waste and entitlement until the money was gone and you had nothing to show for your lives. He turned back to Celeste. But you've spent 27 years proving that you understand the value of work, the importance of service, the meaning of sacrifice. You've raised my children better than their mother did. You've managed this household better than any professional could. You've shown integrity in situations where others would have been tempted to steal or betray trust. So the money is a reward for good behavior? Preston asked sarcastically. No, Harrison replied firmly. The money is a responsibility. Celeste understands that wealth is a tool for building something meaningful, not just for buying things. She understands that with great resources comes the obligation to use them wisely. Dr. Hayes approached the bed with concern. Mr. Whitfield, your heart rate is climbing again. We should wrap this up. Almost finished, Harrison gasped. One more thing. All of you. He looked around the room with desperate intensity. You're all family. Blood family. Celeste, these are your half-siblings. Preston, Camilla, Benedict, this is your half-sister. You can choose to let pride and money destroy those relationships forever, or you can choose to build something real together. An alarm began beeping on one of the monitors. Dr. Hayes moved quickly to check Harrison's vitals, his expression growing alarmed. Everyone out, Dr. Hayes ordered firmly. Mr. Whitfield needs immediate medical attention. As the family reluctantly filed toward the door, Harrison called out weakly. Celeste, please, don't leave me alone. She looked back at Dr. Hayes, who nodded grimly. You can stay. But everyone else needs to go. Now. As the door closed behind Victoria and the children, Celeste found herself alone with her dying father for the first time since learning the truth. Outside the bedroom, she could hear heated whispers and the sound of footsteps pacing back and forth. I'm scared, Harrison whispered, gripping her hand with surprising strength. Of dying? Celeste asked gently. Of leaving you alone with them, Harrison replied. Of leaving you to face their anger and resentment without me there to protect you. Celeste squeezed his hand tighter. I've been facing their anger and resentment for 27 years. The difference is now I know I don't deserve it. Harrison smiled through his pain. You never deserved it. You deserved so much more than I gave you. You gave me enough, Celeste said softly. You gave me a home when I had nowhere to go. You gave me purpose when I was lost. You gave me the chance to love a family, even if they couldn't love me back. But now they can, Harrison said urgently. Now they know the truth. They can choose to see you as family. Through the closed door, the sound of arguing voices suggested that choice was far from certain. But Harrison had done all he could. The rest was up to the family he was leaving behind. As night fell over the Whitfield estate, Harrison Whitfield slipped deeper into his final sleep, while outside his bedroom door, the people he loved most prepared for a battle that would determine whether his last wish for family unity would survive his death. The monitors showed Harrison's vital signs weakening with each passing hour. Dr. Hayes had administered additional medication to ease his breathing, but the inevitable was approaching. Celeste sat beside his bed, holding his hand and listening to the shallow rhythm of his breathing. The arguing outside had finally stopped around 10 p.m., replaced by an uncomfortable silence that felt heavier than the shouting. Victoria had retreated to the guest bedroom, while Preston and Camilla had barricaded themselves in their childhood rooms. Only Benedict remained nearby, sitting quietly in the hallway chair outside his father's door. At 11:47, Harrison's eyes fluttered open. His gaze was unfocused at first, then slowly found Celeste's face in the dim light from the bedside lamp. "Still here," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "I'm not going anywhere," Celeste assured him, squeezing his hand gently. Harrison struggled to speak, his words coming in fragments between labored breaths. "Need to tell you about your mother, about Rosalind. You deserve to know the whole truth." Celeste leaned closer, her heart racing. For 27 years, she had wondered about the details of her parents' relationship. Her mother had shared only fragments before her death, always saying that someday Celeste would understand everything. "Take your time," Celeste said softly. Harrison's eyes grew distant as memory pulled him back 47 years. The Sunset Club was different then. Jazz music, elegant people, real conversations. Not like the sterile places we go now. He paused, gathering strength. "Frank Morrison dragged me there after I got the diagnosis. Said I needed to stop feeling sorry for myself. I was drinking too much, angry at the world, convinced I'd never have the family I wanted." Celeste felt tears building as she pictured her father as a young man, devastated by what he believed was permanent childlessness. "Then I saw her," Harrison continued, his voice growing stronger with a memory. "Rosalind was sitting at the bar, reading a book. Poetry. Langston Hughes. In a jazz club at midnight, this beautiful woman was reading poetry instead of drinking or dancing." A small smile crossed his lips. "I walked over and asked what poem could be more interesting than Miles Davis playing live music. She looked up at me with these incredible eyes, your eyes, and said, 'Dream deferred. Because sometimes the music stops, but words last forever.'" Celeste's breath caught. Her mother had quoted that same poem to her countless times throughout her childhood. "We talked until the club closed. About books, about dreams, about what it meant to build something meaningful with your life." She was 24, working 2 jobs to put herself through nursing school. She had this fierce determination, this incredible strength. Harrison's grip on Celeste's hand tightened. "I was falling in love with her before I even knew her name. But I was also engaged to Victoria. My parents had arranged the marriage to merge 2 wealthy families. It was business, not love, but I was too cowardly to break it off." He turned his head to look directly at Celeste. "That night with your mother, it wasn't just physical. We talked for hours about everything. About my fears of being sterile, about her dreams of becoming a nurse, about what it would be like to find someone who truly understood you." Celeste could picture it, her young mother, brilliant and determined, connecting with a man who saw past her circumstances to her character. And her father, lost and afraid, finding comfort in someone who offered understanding without judgment. "When she showed up at my office 3 months later, pregnant and scared, I panicked," Harrison continued, shame evident in his voice. "Not because I didn't want the baby. I wanted you desperately. But I was terrified of what acknowledging you would cost me." "What did you offer her?" Celeste asked, though she dreaded the answer. "Money. Lots of it. Enough to disappear, give you up for adoption, never contact me again." Harrison's voice broke. "Your mother looked at me with such disappointment. She said, 'I thought you were different. I thought you understood what it meant to love something more than yourself.'" Celeste felt her heart break for both her parents. Her mother, discovering that the man she'd fallen for was willing to pay her to abandon their child. Her father, realizing he was choosing cowardice over love. She refused every offer. Said she would raise you alone. Wanted nothing from me except for me to stay away and never hurt you the way I was hurting her. Harrison's tears flowed freely now. But I couldn't stay away. I hired investigators to watch over you both. Anonymous payments for rent, groceries, medical bills. I made sure you had what you needed, but from a distance. She knew, didn't she? Celeste asked. About the money? Harrison nodded weakly. She was too smart not to figure it out. But she never contacted me directly. She protected you from knowing about me until she thought you were old enough to handle the truth. Celeste remembered her mother's behavior in those final weeks before the car accident. The long phone calls she'd thought were with doctors. The legal documents she'd been organizing. The way she'd talked about Celeste's future with such specific certainty. She was planning to tell me, wasn't she? Right before she died. Yes, Harrison whispered. We had been talking for months about how to handle the truth. She wanted you to know you had a father who loved you, even if he'd been too afraid to claim you. She also wanted to make sure you'd be taken care of if anything happened to her. The pieces clicked into place. The job offer. It came just days after her funeral. I couldn't let you struggle alone. I couldn't watch you lose your home, your stability, everything, when I had the power to help. So I created a position that would bring you here, where I could protect you and be near you. Harrison struggled to continue, his breathing becoming more labored. Your mother made me promise that if I brought you here, I would never treat you as less than family, even if I couldn't acknowledge you publicly. She said you deserved dignity and respect, regardless of the circumstances. But the family treated me like a servant, Celeste said, pain evident in her voice. I know, Harrison replied, guilt heavy in his words. I was a coward again. I told myself that as long as you had a home and income, that was enough. I convinced myself that watching you from a distance was love. But every time they were cruel to you, every time they dismissed you or insulted you, I felt like I was betraying your mother's trust all over again. The bedroom door opened quietly, and Benedict slipped inside. His face was puffy from crying, and he moved carefully to avoid disturbing the medical equipment. Dad, he said softly, can I talk to you? To both of you. Harrison turned toward his youngest son with effort. Of course. Benedict approached the bed hesitantly, his usual confidence completely gone. I've been sitting out there thinking about everything. About how we treated Celeste. About how you must have felt watching it happen. He looked at Celeste with genuine remorse. I was 8 when you started working here. You were the one who taught me to ride a bike when Dad was too busy with work. You helped me with my homework every night for years. You were at my school plays when my own mother couldn't be bothered to show up. Benedict's voice broke. You were more of a parent to me than anyone else in this house. And I repaid you by treating you like garbage once I got old enough to think I was better than you. Benedict, Celeste started, but he held up a hand. No, please let me finish. When I was 16 and got arrested for that party, you're the one who came to get me. Not Mom, not Dad. You. You picked me up from jail at 3 in the morning and never told anyone what really happened. Harrison looked surprised. Arrested? I never knew about any arrest. Because Celeste handled it, Benedict explained. She talked to the officers, convinced them to drop the charges, drove me home, and made me promise to never put myself in that situation again. She protected me from consequences I deserved, and I never even thanked her. Celeste felt tears building again. She had protected all 3 children over the years, covering for their mistakes and shielding them from their parents' disappointment or anger. There's more, Benedict continued, his voice growing stronger. When Camilla had that pregnancy scare senior year, Celeste is the one who drove her to the clinic, held her hand during the appointment, and never told anyone. When Preston crashed his car drunk, Celeste called a tow truck and a cab before calling you, Dad. She made sure he got home safe and that the story stayed quiet. Harrison stared at his youngest son in amazement. I had no idea. Because you trained us not to see her as family, Benedict said, his words cutting deep. You brought our sister into this house and let us treat her like a servant for 27 years. And she took care of us anyway. She loved us anyway. The room fell silent except for the beeping monitors and Harrison's labored breathing. The weight of 27 years of missed opportunities and misunderstood relationships hung in the air like a physical presence. I want to make it right, Benedict said suddenly. I don't care about the money. I want to make it right with my sister. Harrison smiled through his pain. That's all I ever wanted. All of you together. A real family. Dr. Hayes appeared in the doorway, checking his watch with concern. I'm sorry, but Mr. Whitfield needs rest. His vitals are becoming unstable. 5 more minutes, Harrison pleaded. Please. Dr. Hayes checked the monitors and nodded reluctantly. 5 minutes. Then he needs quiet. Harrison turned back to Celeste with desperate urgency. The safe. Behind the painting in my office. You know the combination. Celeste looked confused. I don't know any combination. Your birthday, Harrison whispered. Month, day, year. Inside are more documents. Photos of your mother. Letters she wrote to you that I was supposed to give you when you turned 18. Jewelry that belonged to my mother that should have been yours. Benedict stepped closer. Photos. Letters. Harrison nodded weakly. Everything I should have shared years ago. Everything that proves how much your mother loved you, how proud she was of who you were becoming. Why didn't you give them to me before? Celeste asked. Because giving them to you would have meant admitting the truth. And I was still too much of a coward. Harrison's voice was fading. But you deserve to know how extraordinary your mother thought you were. How she planned for your future even knowing she might not be there to see it. Dr. Hayes stepped forward firmly. That's enough. Mr. Whitfield needs to rest now, or we risk losing him tonight. As Benedict reluctantly moved toward the door, Harrison called out one final time. Son. Benedict turned back. Yes, Dad. Take care of your sister. Be the brother she deserved to have all along. Benedict nodded, tears streaming down his face. I will. I promise. As the bedroom door closed, leaving Celeste alone with her dying father, Harrison squeezed her hand with the last of his strength. Your mother would be so proud, he whispered. You became everything she hoped you would be, despite everything I put you through. She would be proud of you too, Celeste replied softly, for finally telling the truth. Harrison's eyes began to close. Love you, daughter. Love you too, Daddy. And as Harrison Whitfield slipped into his final sleep, Celeste held his hand and whispered the Langston Hughes poem her mother had read that night at the Sunset Club. What happens to a dream deferred? Does it dry up like a raisin in the sun? But tonight, dreams long deferred were finally coming true. A father had claimed his daughter. A family was beginning to heal. And love, after 47 years of hiding in shadows, was finally stepping into the light. Outside the bedroom, the rest of the Whitfield family waited to see if that light would be strong enough to guide them all home. Harrison had passed peacefully at 4:17 a.m., with Celeste holding his hand as the sun began to rise over Beverly Hills. Dr. Hayes had pronounced the time of death while Victoria, Preston, and Camilla stood in the doorway, their faces masks of complicated grief. The man who had dominated their lives for decades was gone, leaving behind a transformed family and a legacy none of them had expected. Now, 3 hours later, Celeste stood before the oil painting in Harrison's office, her fingers trembling as she entered her birth date into the hidden safe. The painting swung aside to reveal a substantial vault filled with documents, photographs, and personal items that represented a lifetime of secrets. Benedict stood beside her, having refused to leave her side since their father's death. Are you sure you want to do this now? He asked gently. It's been a long night. I need to know, Celeste replied, her voice steady despite her exhaustion. I need to understand the whole story. She reached into the safe and withdrew a thick manila envelope marked, for Celeste, in Harrison's distinctive handwriting. Beneath it were several smaller packages wrapped in tissue paper and a wooden box that looked decades old. Eleanor appeared in the doorway carrying a tray of coffee and toast. I thought you might need some sustenance, she said kindly, setting the tray on Harrison's desk. The funeral home will be here in an hour to discuss arrangements. "Thank you," Celeste said, accepting the coffee gratefully. The warmth helped steady her hands as she opened the first envelope. Inside were dozens of photographs spanning 27 years. Pictures of Celeste as a baby in her mother's arms. School photos that had somehow made their way to Harrison. Images of her graduation from high school, taken from a distance by a private investigator. Even photos of her first day working at the Whitfield estate, looking nervous and hopeful in her new uniform. "He was watching you your whole life," Benedict observed, studying a picture of 8-year-old Celeste at a school science fair. "Look at this one. He knew about every important moment." Celeste picked up a photo that took her breath away. It showed her mother, Rosalind, pregnant and glowing, standing outside a small apartment building. On the back, Harrison had written, "7 months. She's so beautiful. I wish I was brave enough to be there with them." "Mom," Celeste whispered, tracing her mother's face with her finger. She had so few photos of her mother during the pregnancy. Seeing Rosalind young and happy, preparing for Celeste's birth, was like discovering a lost piece of her own history. The office door opened, and Preston entered hesitantly. His usual arrogance had been replaced by something resembling humility, though tension still radiated from his posture. "I wanted to talk to you," he said to Celeste, his voice stiff but not hostile. "About the arrangements. About what happens next." Celeste looked up from the photographs. "What do you want to discuss?" Preston moved closer to the desk, his eyes falling on the scattered pictures. He picked up one showing Celeste helping a young Benedict with homework at the kitchen table. In the photo, she was smiling with genuine affection while Benedict looked up at her with obvious adoration. "I remember this," Preston said quietly. "You helped all of us with homework, but Ben was struggling the most that year. You stayed up with him every night for months until he caught up." "He was a smart kid," Celeste replied. "He just needed someone to believe in him." "Someone to care about him," Preston corrected. "Mom was always too busy with her committees and social events. Dad was always traveling or working. You were the only one who actually paid attention to what we needed." Benedict looked surprised at his older brother's admission. Preston had rarely acknowledged anyone's efforts on his behalf, let alone expressed gratitude. "Why are you telling me this?" Celeste asked. Preston set down the photograph and met her eyes directly. "Because I've been up all night thinking about everything Dad said. About how we treated you. About what kind of people we became." He moved to the window, looking out at the estate gardens where Celeste had spent countless hours over the years. "I was 15 when I started really being cruel to you. Before that, I actually liked having you around. You were fun, patient, kind. But then I went to prep school and came back thinking I was better than everyone." Preston turned back to face her. The other kids there, they talked about their staff like they were furniture. Made jokes about the help, treated servants like they were invisible. I started copying that behavior because I thought it made me seem sophisticated. "You were young," Celeste said diplomatically. "I was old enough to know better," Preston replied firmly. "And I kept doing it for 13 years. Even when I saw how it hurt you. Even when I knew it was wrong." Benedict stepped forward. "We all did it. It wasn't just you." "But I was the oldest," Preston said. "I set the example. Camilla and Ben followed my lead because they looked up to me. I made our sister feel like she was worthless when she was actually the best person in this house." The word sister still sounded strange coming from Preston's mouth, but he seemed to be working to accept it as reality. Celeste opened the wooden box next, revealing a collection of jewelry that clearly belonged to different eras. Antique pieces that must have been Harrison's mother's, along with more modern items that were obviously meant for Celeste. At the bottom of the box was a small velvet pouch containing a stunning diamond necklace. The accompanying note read, "For Celeste's wedding day. Every father dreams of seeing his daughter as a bride. Even if I can't walk you down the aisle, I wanted you to have something beautiful for that moment. Love, Dad." Celeste's eyes filled with tears. The thought that Harrison had been planning for milestones in her life that he might never witness was almost too touching to bear. "He really loved you," Benedict said softly. "All these years, he was living a double life. being our father publicly while loving you in secret. The office door opened again, and Camilla entered. Unlike Preston, she looked terrible. Her usually perfect hair was disheveled, her makeup smeared from crying, and her designer clothes were wrinkled. She had clearly spent the night in emotional turmoil. "I need to say something," Camilla announced, her voice thick with tears. "I need to apologize." She approached Celeste directly, ignoring the photographs and jewelry scattered across the desk. "I was horrible to you. Worse than horrible. I was cruel and petty and jealous." "Jealous?" Celeste asked, surprised. "Of course I was jealous," Camilla replied, fresh tears streaming down her face. "You were everything I wanted to be but couldn't manage. You were smart without trying to prove it. You were kind without expecting anything in return. You were strong without being mean about it." Camilla sank into one of the leather chairs, her composure completely gone. "When we were kids, I used to watch you with Mom and wish she would look at me the way she looked at you when you were helping her. Even though you worked for us, she respected you more than she respected her own daughter." "That's not true," Celeste protested. "It is true," Camilla insisted. "Mom always said I was too weak, too emotional, too dependent on others. But she praised you constantly. She told her friends about how competent you were, how reliable, how mature. I started hating you because I wanted to be you." Benedict moved to his sister's side. "Cam, you don't have to torture yourself." "Yes, I do," Camilla said firmly. "Because torture is what I put Celeste through. I made her life miserable because I was jealous of qualities she earned through hard work and good character. I was jealous of someone who was actually my sister." She looked up at Celeste with red, puffy eyes. "I know sorry isn't enough. I know I can't take back 27 years of treating you like garbage. But I need you to know that I see you now. I see who you really are, and I'm ashamed of who I've been." Celeste sat down across from Camilla, studying her sister's face. For the first time, she saw past the entitlement and cruelty to the insecure young woman underneath. "What do you want from me, Camilla?" "I want to learn how to be your sister," Camilla replied simply. "I want to learn how to be someone you could actually like. I want to learn how to be the kind of person Dad was proud of instead of the kind he was ashamed of." "He wasn't ashamed of you," Celeste said gently. "Yes, he was," Camilla corrected. "He was ashamed of all of us. And he should have been. We had every advantage in life and turned into entitled, selfish people. You had every disadvantage and turned into someone amazing." Preston nodded in agreement. "She's right. We wasted every opportunity Dad gave us. We became everything he hated about wealthy families." "But that can change," Benedict said hopefully. "We can still become better people. We can still become the kind of family Dad wanted us to be." Celeste picked up another envelope from the safe, this one containing letters written in her mother's familiar handwriting. She opened the first one, dated just weeks before Rosalind's death. "My dearest Celeste," the letter began. "If you're reading this, it means I'm gone and your father has finally found the courage to tell you the truth. I want you to know that every decision I made was to protect you from a world that might not understand or accept our unconventional family." Celeste read aloud, sharing her mother's words with her newfound siblings. "I chose to raise you alone not because your father didn't want you, but because I wanted you to develop strength and independence before you learned about the wealth and privilege that would one day be yours. I wanted you to know your own worth before you inherited material wealth." The letter continued, "Your father is a good man who made choices based on fear. Forgive him for his cowardice, as I have. Love him for his devotion, as I do. And remember that being his daughter means more than money or status. It means carrying forward the best parts of who he is while learning from his mistakes." Camilla was crying openly now. "She sounds incredible. Your mom sounds like the kind of person I wish I could be." "She was," Celeste agreed. "And she would have loved all of you if she'd had the chance to know you." Preston cleared his throat. "What do we do now? About the funeral, about the estate, about everything." Celeste looked around the room at the three people who had just discovered they were her siblings. 27 years of complicated history couldn't be erased in a single conversation, but something fundamental had shifted. For the first time, she saw them not as the entitled children who had made her life difficult, but as broken people who had been damaged by the same secrets that had shaped her own life. "We figure it out together," she said finally. "As a family." Benedict smiled through his tears. "A real family this time. With real love," Camilla added, her voice still shaky but determined. "And real respect," Preston concluded, meeting Celeste's eyes directly. The sound of cars in the driveway announced the arrival of the funeral director and probably more lawyers. The practical matters of death and inheritance would soon demand their attention. But in this moment, surrounded by photographs and letters that proved decades of hidden love, the Whitfield family was finally whole. Celeste carefully gathered the photos and letters, placing them back in the safe for now. But she kept one item out: the silver bracelet that had connected her to her father for 45 years. She fastened it around her wrist where it belonged, a tangible reminder that love had been there all along, even when she couldn't see it. "Come on," she said to her siblings. "We have a father to honor and a future to build." And for the first time in 27 years, when the Whitfield children walked out of a room together, they walked as equals. The funeral director had just left after making arrangements for Harrison's service, scheduled for Saturday at the prestigious Hillside Memorial Chapel. Celeste, Preston, Camilla, and Benedict had worked together to plan a ceremony that would honor their father's life while acknowledging the family's new reality. For 2 hours, they had functioned as a united front, making decisions together and supporting each other through the painful details of burial arrangements. Then Victoria walked into the living room with her lawyer. Martin Sinclair was Beverly Hills' most ruthless estate attorney, known for destroying families over inheritance disputes. His silver hair and expensive suit couldn't hide the predatory gleam in his eyes as he surveyed the Whitfield children sitting together on the sofas, surrounded by sympathy flowers and legal documents. "Children," Victoria said coldly, her voice carrying none of the grief that had marked her earlier interactions. She had clearly spent the morning preparing for war. Her black dress was perfectly pressed, her makeup flawless, and her demeanor had shifted from grieving widow to calculating adversary. "Mom," Preston began, standing up uncertainly, "we've been planning Dad's funeral. We thought you might want to." "Sit down," Victoria interrupted sharply. "We have more important matters to discuss." Sinclair opened his briefcase with theatrical precision, withdrawing a thick folder of documents. "I've spent the morning reviewing the will that was supposedly executed 2 days ago," he announced. "And I'm afraid there are significant legal problems with its validity." Celeste felt her stomach drop. The fragile peace that had emerged between the siblings suddenly felt threatened by Victoria's obvious intention to contest Harrison's final wishes. "What kind of problems?" Benedict asked, moving protectively closer to Celeste. "Mental competency issues," Sinclair replied smoothly. Mr. Whitfield was heavily medicated during his final days. Morphine, anxiety medications, sleep aids. The combination of these drugs, combined with the stress of terminal illness, creates reasonable doubt about his ability to make sound legal decisions. "That's ridiculous," Camilla said angrily. "Dad was completely lucid when he told us about Celeste. He explained everything clearly, answered our questions, provided documentation." Victoria turned on her daughter with cold fury. "Don't you dare defend this woman against your own family. She's manipulated all of you into accepting this insane story." "It's not a story," Preston said firmly. "The DNA evidence is conclusive. Celeste is our half-sister." "DNA evidence that conveniently appeared just days before your father's death," Sinclair interjected. "DNA evidence that she had ample opportunity to fabricate or manipulate during her 27 years of access to this house." Celeste stood up, her hands clenched into fists. "Are you suggesting I somehow faked paternity tests?" "I'm suggesting that someone with your access to the household could have obtained hair samples, saliva samples, or other genetic material over the years," Sinclair replied with oily professionalism. "Creating false DNA evidence isn't as difficult as people think." "This is insane," Benedict exploded. "You're accusing our sister of running some kind of 27-year con game? Starting when she was 18 years old." Victoria moved closer to her youngest son, her voice taking on a manipulative sweetness. Darling, I know this is confusing. She's been very good at making you children depend on her emotionally. That's exactly what makes her so dangerous. Dangerous, Celeste repeated, incredulous. You've spent almost 3 decades positioning yourself as indispensable to this family, Victoria continued, her mask of civility slipping. Playing the devoted servant while secretly plotting to steal everything we've worked for. Sinclair spread additional documents across the coffee table. Mrs. Whitfield has instructed me to file a formal challenge to the will based on several grounds: mental incompetency, undue influence, fraud, and coercion. Coercion, Preston demanded. Dad wasn't coerced by anyone. Wasn't he? Victoria asked pointedly. Think about it. A dying man, isolated with someone he'd become emotionally dependent on, pumped full of medications that impair judgment. She had unlimited access to him during his most vulnerable moments. Celeste felt the room beginning to spin. Everything she had just gained, everything she had just discovered about her family and her father's love, was being systematically attacked and discredited. The court will appoint independent psychiatric experts to review Mr. Whitfield's medical records, Sinclair continued. They'll determine whether he was competent to make such dramatic changes to his estate planning during his final illness. And what happens to the will in the meantime? Celeste asked, though she dreaded the answer. It will be frozen pending the outcome of our challenge, Sinclair replied with satisfaction. No assets can be transferred, no inheritance distributed, nothing changed until the matter is resolved in court. Victoria smiled coldly. Which could take years. During which time, you'll have no legal standing in this house and no access to any Whitfield resources. Camilla stood up abruptly, her face flushed with anger. Mom, how can you do this? How can you try to steal our sister's inheritance? She's not your sister, Victoria shrieked, her composure finally cracking. She's the bastard child of some woman your father had a meaningless encounter with decades ago. She doesn't belong in this family. Yes, she does, Preston said firmly. Whether you accept it or not, she's our half-sister. She's Dad's daughter. And she deserves everything he wanted to give her. Victoria turned on her eldest son with vicious fury. Then you're a fool. She's destroyed your inheritance, turned you against your own mother, and convinced you to betray your own family. And you're defending her. We're defending what's right, Benedict said quietly. We're defending what Dad wanted. Sinclair gathered his documents with practiced efficiency. The legal challenge will be filed this afternoon. Miss Parker will receive formal notice within 48 hours. I suggest she retain competent legal counsel. I suggest you prepare for a fight you can't win, Celeste replied, her voice steady despite her racing heart. Victoria stepped closer, her eyes blazing with hatred. Oh, we'll win. Because I know things about you that you think are secret. I know about the times you went through my jewelry when I was away. I know about the cash that went missing from Harrison's desk drawer. I know about the credit card charges that were mysteriously reversed. Celeste stared at her in shock. I never stole anything from this family. Not ever. Prove it, Victoria challenged. Prove that someone with your access to every room, every safe, every financial account never took advantage of that access. Prove that you never manipulated my husband during his weakest moments. The burden of proof is on you, Celeste replied, though her voice shook slightly. You're the one making accusations. Actually, Sinclair interjected, in cases involving undue influence and fraud, the burden often shifts to the beneficiary to prove the inheritance was legitimate. Miss Parker will need to demonstrate that she never used her position to manipulate Mr. Whitfield. Preston stepped forward, his face dark with anger. This is character assassination. You're trying to destroy Celeste's reputation because you can't accept that Dad chose her over you. Dad chose a lie over his real family, Victoria spat. And you're all too stupid to see it. The room erupted in shouting as the siblings defended Celeste against their mother's attacks. Victoria responded with increasingly vicious accusations, while Sinclair took notes that would undoubtedly become part of his legal strategy. In the midst of the chaos, Celeste felt something inside her break. Not her resolve or her determination, but her hope that this family could truly heal. Victoria's hatred was too deep, too poisonous, too determined to destroy everything Harrison had tried to build. "Stop," Celeste said quietly, but no one heard her over the shouting. "Stop," she yelled, her voice cutting through the noise like a blade. The room fell silent, everyone turning to stare at her. Celeste looked around at the faces of the people who had just become her family, then at Victoria and Sinclair, who were clearly prepared to destroy that family to get what they wanted. "I won't do this," Celeste said firmly. "I won't let this family tear itself apart over money." "Celeste," Benedict began, but she held up a hand to stop him. "Your mother is right about one thing," Celeste continued, her voice growing stronger. "This will destroy all of you. It will turn siblings against each other, children against parents, love against greed. It will take years to resolve and cost hundreds of thousands in legal fees." Victoria smiled triumphantly. "So you're giving up, admitting this whole thing was a fraud?" "No," Celeste replied calmly. "I'm saying that if this is what inheriting Harrison's wealth costs, then the price is too high." She turned to Preston, Camilla, and Benedict, seeing the confusion and pain in their faces. "I just found my father. I just found my siblings. I just discovered that I'm part of a family that actually loves me. I won't lose that fighting over money." "But it's not just money," Camilla protested. "It's what Dad wanted. It's his final wish." "Dad's final wish was for us to be a real family," Celeste corrected. "He said so himself. The money was just a tool to make that possible." Sinclair leaned forward with interest. "Are you saying you're willing to renounce your claim to the inheritance?" Celeste met his eyes directly. "I'm saying that I'd rather have a family than a fortune. I'd rather have siblings who love me than siblings who resent me for taking what they think belongs to them." "It does belong to them," Victoria exclaimed. "They're his legitimate children." "And so am I," Celeste replied firmly. "But I'm also someone who understands that some things are more valuable than money." Preston stood up, his face pale but determined. "No, absolutely not. We won't let you give up what's rightfully yours just to avoid a legal fight." "This isn't your decision to make," Celeste said gently. "Yes, it is," Camilla insisted, moving to stand beside Preston. "Because we're your family, and family doesn't let family sacrifice themselves for other people's greed." Benedict joined his siblings, creating a united front that faced both Celeste and Victoria. "We'll fight this together. All of us. And we'll win because Dad was right, and the evidence proves it." Victoria stared at her children in disbelief. "You're choosing her over me. You're choosing a stranger over your own mother." "We're choosing what's right over what's easy," Preston replied. "We're choosing to honor Dad's wishes over preserving your pride." "And we're choosing our sister," Camilla added firmly. "Because that's what she is. Our sister. Whether you like it or not." Victoria's face contorted with rage and pain. "Then you're no children of mine. If you want to throw away your birthright for this woman, then you can live with the consequences." She stormed toward the door, Sinclair following with his briefcase. At the threshold, she turned back one final time. "This isn't over," she hissed. "I'll destroy her. I'll destroy all of you before I let her steal what belongs to my family." The sound of the front door slamming echoed through the mansion like a gunshot. In the silence that followed, the four siblings stood together, united but facing the fight of their lives. The family bonds that had just been formed were about to be tested in ways none of them could imagine. But for the first time in 27 years, Celeste wasn't facing the battle alone. She had her father's love, her mother's strength, and something she'd never had before: siblings who were willing to fight for her. The question was whether that would be enough to survive what Victoria Whitfield was planning to unleash upon them all. 24 hours after Victoria's declaration of war, the Whitfield siblings sat around their father's desk with attorney Jonathan Pierce and Rebecca Chen, the estate litigation specialist Pierce had recommended. The formal legal challenge had been filed that morning, and Chen was explaining the brutal reality of what lay ahead. Victoria's team has filed on 4 separate grounds: Chen said, spreading documents across the mahogany surface. Mental incompetency, undue influence, fraud, and something called family abandonment theory, which argues that Harrison's failure to acknowledge Celeste for 27 years proves he never intended her to inherit. Preston leaned back in his leather chair, exhaustion evident in his posture. How long will this take? 18 months minimum, Chen replied. Possibly 3 years if they appeal. And that's assuming we win at every level. What are the chances we lose? Benedict asked quietly. Chen's expression was grim. Estate challenges succeed about 30% of the time when the deceased changed their will close to death. Victoria has hired Martin Sinclair, who's won some cases with much weaker evidence than this. Celeste studied the legal documents with growing dread. Each page outlined a new way Victoria intended to destroy her credibility and character. Accusations of theft, manipulation, fraud, and conspiracy filled dozens of paragraphs written in cold legal language. There's something else, Chen continued hesitantly. Victoria has hired a private investigation firm. They're already interviewing former household staff, business associates, anyone who might have observed interactions between Celeste and Harrison over the years. Looking for what? Camilla demanded. Evidence of inappropriate influence. Witnesses who might testify that Celeste manipulated Harrison emotionally, isolated him from family, or used her position to gain access to confidential information. Attorney Pierce cleared his throat. There's also the matter of legal fees. This kind of litigation can cost upwards of $2 million. Since the estate is frozen, those costs would have to come from other sources. The siblings looked at each other with dawning realization. None of them had $2 million in liquid assets. Their trust funds from Harrison wouldn't be accessible until age 30, and those accounts were now frozen anyway. We'll figure out the money, Preston said firmly. We'll mortgage our properties, liquidate investments, whatever it takes. That's exactly what Victoria is counting on, Chen warned. She knows you don't have the resources for a prolonged fight. Her strategy is to bankrupt you emotionally and financially until you're forced to settle. Celeste stood up abruptly, moving to the window that overlooked the gardens where she'd spent so many peaceful moments over the years. What kind of settlement would she offer? Probably something like this, Chen replied, consulting her notes. You get a modest lump sum, maybe $500,000, in exchange for renouncing all claims to the estate. The siblings get their original trust funds, but nothing more. Victoria inherits the bulk of everything. That's less than what Dad left each of us anyway, Benedict pointed out. Exactly. She's betting that the stress and cost of fighting will make even a bad settlement look attractive compared to years of legal warfare. Celeste turned back to face the room. What she's really betting on is that this fight will destroy the relationships we just built. She wants the legal process to turn us against each other. It won't, Camilla said fiercely. We won't let that happen. But Chen's expression suggested she'd seen many families make that same promise before watching it crumble under legal pressure. I need to be honest with you. This won't just be about money or documents. Victoria's team will attack Celeste's character, your family's reputation, and every relationship you have. They'll make your private lives public, twist every interaction into evidence of conspiracy, and paint you all as either victims or accomplices. The weight of what they were facing settled over the room like a heavy blanket. This wasn't just about proving Harrison's will was valid. It was about surviving an all-out assault designed to destroy them personally and financially. I can't ask you to go through this for me, Celeste said quietly. I won't let you sacrifice your lives and your money to fight my battle. It's not just your battle, Preston replied firmly. It's Dad's battle. He spent 27 years protecting you in secret. Now it's our turn to protect you in public. Mrs. Eleanor appeared in the doorway carrying a tea service, her timing impeccable as always. Excuse me, but there are reporters gathering outside the front gate. Word about the will challenge has apparently leaked. Chen cursed under her breath. Victoria's team probably tipped them off. Media attention always makes these cases worse. Through the window, Celeste could see news vans beginning to line the street outside the estate. The private family matter was about to become public entertainment, with every detail of their lives exposed for public consumption. "There's something else you need to know," Eleanor said, setting down the tea tray with unusual nervousness. "Mrs. Victoria called this morning. She's offering positions to all the household staff if they'll sign statements about things they may have witnessed over the years." "What kind of things?" Benedict asked, though his tone suggested he already knew. Anything that might suggest Miss Celeste had inappropriate influence over Mr. Harrison. Times when she was alone with him, conversations they might have overheard, instances where she handled financial matters or personal business. Celeste felt sick. "She's trying to turn the staff against me." "Most of them hung up on her," Eleanor said with satisfaction. "But a few seemed interested. People have bills to pay, and Mrs. Victoria is offering substantial compensation for the right kind of testimony." Chen made notes on her legal pad. "We'll need to interview all the current and former staff ourselves. Get their statements on record before Victoria's team can influence them further." "This is getting out of hand," Camilla said, standing up to pace the room. "She's trying to destroy our entire family to get what she wants." "That's exactly what she's doing," Pierce agreed. "Victoria Whitfield has unlimited resources and no apparent moral boundaries. She's treating this like a war, not a legal proceeding." Benedict moved to stand beside Celeste at the window. "Are you having second thoughts about fighting this?" Celeste watched the reporters setting up cameras and interviewing neighbors. Her quiet life was about to become a public spectacle, her every action scrutinized and judged by strangers who would never understand the complexities of her situation. "I keep thinking about what Dad said," she replied. "About how money was just a tool for building something meaningful. About how family was more important than fortune." "But Dad also said you deserved this inheritance," Benedict pointed out. "He said you'd earned it through 27 years of service and sacrifice." "And he was right," Preston added, joining them at the window. "You did earn it. But more than that, you're the only one of us who can be trusted with it. Dad knew that. That's why he chose you." Chen stood up, gathering her documents. "I need a decision from all of you. Are we fighting this challenge, or are we exploring settlement options? Because the strategy has to be decided now, before this gets any uglier." Celeste looked around the study where Harrison had spent so many hours building his empire. She could almost feel his presence in the room, watching to see what choice his children would make. "What would happen to the businesses if Victoria inherits?" she asked. "She'd probably sell most of them," Pierce replied. "Victoria has no interest in running companies. She wants liquid assets she can spend." "And the employees? The people whose livelihoods depend on those businesses?" Chen consulted her files. Harrison's companies employ about 15,000 people directly, with probably another 10,000 jobs dependent on their operations. If Victoria liquidates everything, most of those positions would be eliminated. Celeste thought about all the families who would be affected if Victoria got her way. Harrison had built something bigger than personal wealth. He'd created jobs, supported communities, invested in futures that extended far beyond his own family. "Dad didn't leave me this inheritance just because I'm his daughter," she said slowly. "He left it to me because he trusted me to continue what he built, to take care of the people and communities he cared about." "Exactly," Camilla agreed. "He knew we just wasted on clothes and cars and parties. But he knew you'd use it responsibly." "So what's your decision?" Chin asked directly. Celeste turned back to face the room, her resolve strengthening. "We fight. Not for the money, but for what Dad built. For the people who depend on those companies. For the family he wanted us to become. Even knowing what it will cost?" Chen pressed. "Even knowing Victoria will try to destroy you personally?" "Especially knowing that," Celeste replied firmly. "Because if we let her win through intimidation and character assassination, we're proving that love and integrity don't matter. We're proving that money is more powerful than truth." Preston moved to stand beside his sister. "Then we fight together. All of us." "Together," Camilla agreed, taking Celeste's hand. "Together," Benedict confirmed, completing the circle. Chen smiled for the first time since entering the room. "Good. Because Victoria Whitfield just made a major tactical error. She assumed you'd be divided and afraid. She has no idea what a united family can accomplish when they're fighting for something they believe in. Outside, the media circus was growing larger by the hour. Victoria's strategy was working exactly as planned. The Whitfield family was about to be dragged through the mud, their private lives exposed, their relationships tested in ways they'd never imagined. But Victoria had miscalculated one crucial factor. The siblings she'd raised to be selfish and entitled had chosen love over money, family over fortune, and integrity over inheritance. They'd chosen to stand with the sister she'd taught them to despise, and they were willing to risk everything to honor their father's final wish. The battle for Harrison Whitfield's legacy was about to begin in earnest. But the real war had already been won the moment his children chose each other over their own comfort. Now they just had to prove that love was stronger than greed, and that family bonds forged in truth could survive any assault designed to break them. The choice had been made. The fight would determine whether that choice was strong enough to overcome the forces arrayed against them. Harrison Whitfield's funeral had drawn over 300 mourners, including business leaders, politicians, and society figures who had known him for decades. But the real drama unfolded in the front row, where two separate families sat on opposite sides of the aisle, representing the battle that would define his legacy. On the left sat Victoria, flanked by Martin Sinclair and several associates who had clearly been chosen more for intimidation than grief. She wore an elegant black suit and an expression of wounded dignity that played perfectly for the camera's position discreetly around the chapel. On the right sat Celeste, Preston, Camilla, and Benedict, united in their shared loss and determination. Celeste wore a simple black dress and the silver bracelet that connected her to her father's memory. The siblings had positioned themselves protectively around her, making their allegiance clear to everyone present. As the service concluded and mourners began filing out, Judge William Carter approached the family with grave concern. Carter had been Harrison's friend for over 30 years and had served as witness to the will signing just days before. "I've been following the legal challenge," Carter said quietly to Celeste. "I wanted you to know that I'll testify about your father's mental state when he signed those documents. He was completely lucid and determined." "Thank you," Celeste replied, grateful for any support in the coming battle. Victoria noticed the conversation and approached with Martin Sinclair close behind. "Judge Carter," she said with practiced charm, "how thoughtful of you to attend. I'm sure you understand the difficult position this family is in." "I understand perfectly," Carter replied coolly. "I understand that Harrison made his wishes crystal clear, and some people are refusing to respect them." Sinclair stepped forward with oily professionalism. "Your Honor, surely you can appreciate the complexity of this situation. A man changes his will dramatically just days before death, leaving everything to someone who isn't even legally recognized as family." "She is legally recognized," Carter stated firmly. "The DNA evidence is conclusive, the paternity is established, and Harrison acknowledged her as his daughter in front of multiple witnesses. Witnesses who were present during highly emotional and medically compromised circumstances," Sinclair countered. Preston moved closer to the conversation, his face dark with anger. "Judge Carter, my stepmother is trying to steal my sister's inheritance through legal manipulation. She's bribing staff, intimidating witnesses, and lying to the media." "That's a serious accusation," Carter noted. "With serious evidence," Benedict added, pulling out his phone. "We have recordings of Victoria offering money to household staff in exchange for testimony against Celeste." Victoria's face went pale. "Those recordings were made without consent. They're inadmissible." "Not in California," Camilla said with satisfaction. "California is a one-party consent state. Any participant in a conversation can record it legally." Sinclair's confidence visibly wavered. He had clearly not expected the siblings to be so well prepared or legally informed. "Furthermore," Preston continued, "we have documentation showing that Victoria has been systematically hiding assets from the estate. Dad's collection of rare artworks, several investment accounts, and the proceeds from selling his yacht last month." "Those are marital assets," Victoria protested. "Actually, they're not," Benedict said, consulting notes prepared by their legal team. "California is a community property state, but the art collection was purchased before your marriage. The investment accounts were inherited from Dad's parents, and the yacht sale proceeds legally belong to the estate. Judge Carter looked increasingly serious. These are matters for the court to resolve, but if what you're saying is accurate, Mrs. Whitfield could be facing criminal charges for estate fraud. The conversation was interrupted by Dr. Hayes, who had attended the service and now approached with obvious reluctance. "Excuse me," Dr. Hayes said, addressing Victoria directly. "Mrs. Whitfield, I need to speak with you about the medical records you requested." Victoria looked confused. "Medical records?" "The ones your attorney subpoenaed. I've reviewed them carefully, and I need to inform you that they actually support Miss Parker's position, not yours." Sinclair stepped forward quickly. "Dr. Hayes, this isn't the appropriate venue for discussing confidential medical information." "You're right," Dr. Hayes agreed. "But I can say publicly that Mr. Whitfield was mentally competent throughout his final week. His medication levels were carefully monitored, his cognitive function was assessed daily, and he demonstrated clear understanding of all decisions he made." He turned to Celeste with genuine warmth. "Your father was very proud of you. He told me several times that acknowledging you as his daughter was the most important thing he'd ever done." Victoria's carefully constructed facade was beginning to crack. The evidence she had counted on to support her case was systematically falling apart, and her own criminal liability was becoming apparent. "This is all very touching," she said desperately, "but it doesn't change the fundamental facts. Celeste manipulated a dying man into leaving her a fortune she never earned." Actually, a new voice interrupted, "It does change everything." Everyone turned to see Frank Morrison, Harrison's oldest friend, approaching with a thick folder of documents. At 78, Frank moved slowly but with obvious purpose. "Frank," Celeste said in surprise, "I didn't know you were here." "I've been watching from the back," Frank replied, "waiting to see if these documents would be necessary. Apparently, they are." He opened the folder and withdrew papers that were clearly decades old. "Harrison asked me to keep these safe years ago. He said if anything ever happened to him, and if there was ever a question about Celeste's inheritance, I should bring them forward." Sinclair eyed the documents warily. "What kind of papers?" "Letters," Frank replied simply. "Love letters between Harrison and Rosalind Jones, dating from 1977 to 1997. 20 years of correspondence that proves their relationship was far more than a one-night stand." The gathered group stared in shock. Celeste felt her heart racing as Frank continued. "Harrison and Rosalind maintained a relationship for 20 years. Not a physical relationship, but an emotional one. Letters about Celeste's childhood, about Harrison's feelings for both of them, about his regret over not being able to claim his daughter publicly." He handed several letters to Celeste with gentle care. "Your mother saved every letter your father ever sent her. And your father kept copies of every letter she sent him. They loved each other for 20 years, and they both loved you." Celeste opened the first letter with trembling hands. Harrison's handwriting was younger but unmistakable. "My dearest Rosalind, watching Celeste take her first steps in the park today was the most beautiful moment of my life. I wish I could have been there beside you both. I wish I was brave enough to claim the family I love more than anything." Tears streamed down her face as the true scope of her parents' relationship became clear. This wasn't about a momentary lapse in judgment or a mistake that Harrison had tried to correct. This was about a love story that had lasted 2 decades, constrained by social expectations but never diminished. "There's more," Frank continued. "Harrison revised his will multiple times over the years. Every version left the bulk of his estate to Celeste. The only thing that changed was the timing of when she would inherit it." Judge Carter examined the letters with growing amazement. These are dated consistently over 20 years. They reference specific events in Celeste's life, Harrison's business dealings, family situations. This is comprehensive documentation of an ongoing relationship. Victoria lunged forward, trying to grab the letters. "Those are forgeries. Fabrications created to support this ridiculous story." "Actually," Frank said calmly, "they're not. I've kept them in a safety deposit box at First National Bank for over 20 years. The bank has security footage showing when the box was accessed, and forensic analysis will prove the age of the paper and ink. Sinclair was frantically taking notes, but his confident demeanor had completely evaporated. We'll need time to review these documents, verify their authenticity, assess their legal implications. Of course, Frank agreed. But you should know that Harrison also left a videotaped message, recorded 6 months ago when he was completely healthy. He explains his entire relationship with Rosalind, his reasons for keeping Celeste's identity secret, and his intentions for the inheritance. Preston looked at Frank with amazement. Dad made a video? He wanted to ensure that if Victoria challenged the will, there would be absolutely no doubt about his intentions or mental competency, Frank explained. The video is currently in the possession of Judge Morrison at the Superior Court. Victoria stared at the assembled evidence with growing horror. Her legal challenge wasn't just falling apart. It was revealing the depth of Harrison's long-term planning and the strength of his relationship with both Rosalind and Celeste. This changes everything, Judge Carter observed. A 20-year relationship documented in correspondence, videotaped testimony recorded months before death. Multiple will revisions showing consistent intent. Mrs. Whitfield, your challenge appears to be without merit. Victoria turned on her children with desperate fury. Are you just going to stand there and let them steal your inheritance? Fight for what belongs to you. We are fighting for what belongs to us, Camilla replied firmly. We're fighting for our sister. We're fighting for our father's wishes. We're fighting for our family. She's not your family, Victoria screamed, her composure completely gone. Yes, she is, Benedict said simply. She's been our family for 27 years. We were just too blind to see it. Sinclair closed his briefcase with obvious defeat. Mrs. Whitfield, given this new evidence, I strongly recommend withdrawing the challenge and negotiating a settlement. Never, Victoria spat. I'll fight this forever. I'll appeal every decision, challenge every document, contest every ruling. You'll also face criminal charges for estate fraud and witness tampering, Judge Carter pointed out. I suggest you consider your position carefully. Frank approached Celeste and handed her the entire folder of letters. These belong to you now. Your parents' love story, documented in their own words. Your father wanted you to have them when the time was right. Celeste hugged the letters to her chest, feeling the weight of 20 years of hidden love. Thank you for keeping them safe. Thank you for becoming the woman they both hoped you'd be, Frank replied. As the group began to disperse, Victoria made one final desperate attempt. You'll regret this, she called out to her children. All of you. When she's tired of pretending to be family, when she's got what she wanted, you'll see who she really is. Preston turned back to face his mother with pity rather than anger. We already see who she really is. She's our sister. She's our father's daughter. And she's the only one of us who truly understands what family means. 6 months later, the legal challenge was officially withdrawn. Victoria Whitfield quietly accepted a settlement that gave her the house in Malibu and a modest trust fund, in exchange for dropping all claims against the estate. She moved to Europe and was rarely heard from again. Celeste inherited Harrison's business empire and used it exactly as he had hoped. She expanded the company's charitable foundations, invested in education and job training programs, and created opportunities for thousands of people to build better lives. She kept the Beverly Hills mansion but opened it for community events and fundraisers, transforming it from a symbol of exclusivity into a center of philanthropy. Preston returned to school and earned an MBA, then joined Celeste in running the family businesses. He discovered a talent for strategic planning and became the brother who helped translate Celeste's vision into practical reality. Camilla started a non-profit organization focused on helping young women from disadvantaged backgrounds access higher education. She used her social connections and family resources to create opportunities instead of just attending parties. Benedict found his calling in documentary filmmaking, creating powerful stories about social justice and family healing. His first film, about discovering his sister's true identity, won several awards and helped other families facing similar challenges. On the first anniversary of Harrison's death, the 4 siblings gathered in his study to read the final letter he had left for them. In it, He expressed his hope that they would become the family he had always dreamed of, built on love rather than obligation, truth rather than convenience. "I spent 27 years watching Celeste love a family that couldn't love her back," Harrison had written. "Now I'm trusting that family to love her the way she always deserved. Don't let me down." They hadn't let him down. They had become exactly the family he had envisioned. United by choice, strengthened by truth, and dedicated to using their resources to make the world better. Love had triumphed over greed. Family had conquered all obstacles. And in the end, Harrison Whitfield's greatest legacy wasn't his fortune but the relationships he had helped heal through his final act of courage and honesty. The silver bracelet still gleamed on Celeste's wrist, but now it was joined by a wedding ring. She had married Dr. Hayes 2 years later, finding love with someone who had witnessed her strength during the family's darkest moments. As she tucked her father's final letter back into its envelope, Celeste smiled at the family portrait on his desk. It showed all 4 siblings together at Benedict's wedding, laughing and embracing like people who had never known conflict. Sometimes the best families aren't the ones you're born into, but the ones you choose to become. And sometimes it takes losing everything to find out what truly matters most. The Whitfield legacy lived on, not in bank accounts or stock portfolios, but in the hearts of 4 people who had learned that love is the only inheritance that really counts. 5 years later, on the 5th anniversary of Harrison's revelation, Celeste knelt beside her mother's grave with a bouquet of white roses and a framed photograph. The photo showed 4 siblings and their families gathered around Harrison's portrait, smiling with the kind of genuine happiness that only comes from hard-won peace. "Hi, Mom," Celeste whispered, placing the flowers carefully on the headstone that now bore a new inscription. "Beloved mother and wife, her love story changed everything. I brought everyone to meet you finally." Behind her, Preston stood with his wife Maria and their twin daughters, 5-year-old Hope and Grace. The girls had inherited their father's height and their mother's warm brown eyes, and they called Celeste Aunt Cece, with the easy affection of children who had never known family division. Camilla sat on a nearby bench with her husband, Dr. Kevin Hayes, Dr. Hayes' son, whom she'd met at Celeste's wedding, and their 3-year-old son Harrison, named for the grandfather he would never meet but whose legacy shaped his world. The nonprofit Camilla had founded now operated in 12 cities, providing scholarships and mentorship to over 2,000 young women annually. Benedict held hands with his husband Marcus, a social worker they'd met while filming a documentary about foster care reform. They were in the process of adopting siblings from the system, determined to give other children the family unity they discovered so late in their own lives. Mrs. Eleanor, now 83 and officially retired but still managing various household details, sat in a wheelchair pushed by her grandson. She had become Celeste's honorary mother and the children's beloved Grandma Ellie, the keeper of family stories and Sunday dinner traditions. "Mrs. Rosalind would be so proud," Eleanor said softly, dabbing at her eyes with a lace handkerchief. All her children together, loving each other like she always dreamed. The extended family included not just spouses and children, but the business managers, foundation directors, and community leaders who had become part of their chosen family over the years. Under Celeste's leadership, Whitfield Enterprises had doubled in size while tripling its charitable giving, creating a model that other family businesses now studied and emulated. "Remember when we used to come here separately?" Preston asked, settling beside his mother-in-law on another bench. "You visiting Mom, us avoiding anything that reminded us of uncomfortable truths." "I remember being afraid you'd see me here," Celeste admitted. "Afraid you'd think I was overstepping by grieving someone you didn't know I had a right to grieve." Benedict's documentary about their family's transformation had won an Emmy and sparked national conversations about hidden families, inheritance justice, and the courage required for radical honesty. The film's proceeds funded a foundation that provided legal support for children seeking recognition from wealthy biological parents. "Dad would have loved this," Camilla said, watching her son toddle between the headstones with fearless curiosity. "All of us together, using what he built to help other people build better lives." The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of an unexpected visitor. Victoria emerged from a black sedan, moving slowly but with obvious purpose. At 65, she looked older than her years, her face marked by the loneliness that comes from choosing pride over family. The siblings tensed instinctively, old defensive patterns surfacing despite years of healing. Victoria had honored the terms of her settlement, maintaining distance and making no further legal challenges, but her sudden appearance created immediate anxiety. "I'm not here to cause trouble," Victoria said quickly, recognizing their wariness. "I came to pay my respects to Rosalind, and to apologize." She approached Celeste directly, her hands trembling slightly with age or emotion. "I spent 5 years in Europe thinking about what I did to this family, what I tried to destroy out of jealousy and greed." Victoria's voice was different now, stripped of its earlier venom and calculation. "I was so focused on what I thought I deserved that I couldn't see what you actually were. You were the daughter Harrison loved, the sister my children needed, the leader this family required." Celeste studied Victoria's face, searching for signs of manipulation or hidden agenda. But she saw only genuine remorse and the exhaustion that comes from carrying years of regret. "I don't expect forgiveness," Victoria continued. "I don't deserve it. But I needed you to know that I understand now what I tried to destroy. I understand what Harrison saw in you that he never saw in me." Preston stepped forward, his voice cautious but not hostile. "Why now? Why come back after all this time?" "Because I'm dying," Victoria replied simply. "Pancreatic cancer. 6 months, maybe less. And I couldn't face whatever comes next knowing I'd never acknowledged the truth." The family absorbed this news with complicated emotions. Despite everything Victoria had done, she was still Preston, Camilla, and Benedict's mother. Her impending death brought no satisfaction, only sadness for opportunities lost and relationships that could never be fully repaired. "I watched the documentary," Victoria said to Benedict. "I saw what you've all become, what she helped you become. You're everything Harrison hoped you'd be, and I'm proud of you despite having no right to be." Camilla moved to her mother's side, her eyes filled with tears. "Mom, where have you been living? Are you alone?" "I have a small apartment in Nice. Some acquaintances from the expatriate community. It's enough." Victoria's voice was steady, but her isolation was evident. "I made my choices. I'm not asking for sympathy." "But you're asking for something," Celeste observed gently. Victoria nodded, fresh tears appearing. "I'm asking for permission to know my grandchildren before I go. Not to disrupt their lives or create confusion. Just to know that some part of me might live on in something good." The request hung in the air like a bridge waiting to be crossed. 5 years of healing had taught the siblings that forgiveness was possible, but trust had to be earned through actions, not just words. "There would have to be conditions," Preston said carefully. "Supervised visits. No attempts to undermine what we've built. No toxic behavior around the children." "I understand," Victoria replied. "I just want to read them stories, maybe share some happy memories of their parents as children. I want to do something good with whatever time I have left." Celeste looked around at her siblings, seeing the same cautious hope in their faces that she felt in her heart. Harrison's final letter had spoken about love conquering all obstacles, including the obstacles created by their own past mistakes. "We'll try," Celeste said finally. "Slowly, carefully, but we'll try." Victoria broke down completely then, 20 years of defensive anger finally giving way to genuine grief and gratitude. Camilla embraced her mother while Preston and Benedict joined the circle, creating a moment of healing that had seemed impossible just minutes before. "Thank you," Victoria whispered. "Thank you for being better people than I taught you to be." As the sun set over Los Angeles, the extended Whitfield family gathered around Rosalind's grave for an impromptu memorial service. They shared stories about Harrison, about their mother, about the long journey from secrets to truth to healing. Mrs. Eleanor produced a thermos of hot chocolate and paper cups from her seemingly endless supply of practical solutions. The grandchildren played among the flowers while the adults planned careful steps toward rebuilding one final damaged relationship. "You know what I think," Benedict said, holding Marcus's hand while watching his nephew chase butterflies. "I think Mom and Dad are somewhere together, watching all this and finally getting the love story they deserved. I think they're proud of us for choosing love over resentment," Preston added. "I think they're planning what comes next," Camilla said with a smile. "Mom never could resist organizing people's lives for their own good." Celeste touched the silver bracelet at her wrist, then placed her hand on her mother's headstone. I think they're happy we're finally the family they both dreamed we could be. As darkness fell, the Whitfield family packed up their memorial items and prepared to return home. But this time, no one would be going home alone. Victoria would spend the evening at Preston's house, meeting her granddaughters over dinner and bedtime stories. It wouldn't be easy. Trust would have to be rebuilt slowly, and Victoria's time was limited. But they had learned that love could overcome seemingly impossible obstacles when people chose courage over comfort, truth over convenience, and family over everything else. The silver bracelet caught the moonlight as Celeste walked away from her mother's grave, surrounded by the family that love had created from the ashes of secrets and lies. Some stories end with dramatic victory. Others end with quiet triumph. This one ended with the most powerful victory of all, a family that had learned to choose each other again and again, no matter what challenges life brought their way. 5 years after a dying man's confession changed everything, love had indeed conquered all. Thank you for staying with me until the very end of this incredible journey. If this story touched your heart, wait until you see what's coming next. It's even more powerful and inspiring than you can imagine. So don't go anywhere. Click on that video showing on your screen right now to dive into another amazing story that will absolutely blow your mind. Trust me, you won't regret it.